What? Oh, we beat Kathy. Oh, we
Uh-oh.
beat Kathy back. Kathy slow.
I mean, I barely made it, but hey.
Yep, I kind of started at about like 20 seconds early, so it's okay. You'll
Oh,
live.
I mean, I'm fine.
Are you fine, fine? Or are you fine, 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 fine?
Just fine.
Just fine.
So let's not get out of hand here.
We are a little early, guys. I kind of started the stream a little bit early. Kathy is not back yet from getting her alcohol. Usually she's the first one back. And
But
always
luckily,
yelling
I
at me.
know that it's episode 84.
Are we on episode 84?
We are.
Sweet. Guys, thanks for joining us for episode 84. Today we are going to talk about terrain. Not only how it fits within your game, how it fits within certain games, the decision of Privateer Press to remove hills and elevation from the game. And you'll be surprised, John, I don't have a lot of media this week.
I am
Oh,
surprised.
big
I also
shocking.
don't have a lot of media this week.
But I do have a few things I need to talk about. And also a pretty good announcement about More Than Dice. Also, if you are in the chat channel and you have received something from us this week, I think there was 2 people that got their freebies that we gave away. If you got those, you should have a little card that is a 3D print of our logo. We're going to be giving those out to people, and it'll be one of our rewards on our Patreon. It'll be a little bit different. We want to see what y'all do with them. We want to see what you paint them up, because they're PLA plastic. You can paint them up. Do what you need. Show us. Do like a gone to so-and-so somewhere with, More Than Dice, and take a picture of it. And I think that'd be cool.
It would be cool.
So I think Moondoggy and someone else probably got one of those. I know that Carl, I don't know if anybody saw what Carl got this week as a gift from me to him. I printed out him a dice box. And the dice box, the lid was Nicolas Cage's face, and the bottom of the dice box was Nicolas Cage's face. And,
Awesome.
So, of course, he thoroughly enjoyed that. But he's also a really, really good friend of mine that I'll do stuff like that because it's just how I am. Let's go ahead and go with drinks. John, what you drinking tonight?
I am drinking Jim Beam Fire Whiskey with Dr. Pepper. This time carefully measured out, since I got a jigger to measure out the appropriate amount, so I don't just, do it live. Apparently, occasionally I make these things downright hostile.
All right. Kathy, what you drinking tonight?
Ginger ale, because I already drank my gin.
You already drank your gin. I'm going with another bottle of Dragon's Milk. I bought 2 4-packs as well. I haven't drank any this week, which is a surprise. So I'm going to go with that. I do know that we have one send-off we need to do. If nobody saw it, I guess the father from the Alf TV series passed away.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember his name, and I'm going to do that, but I have John to do that for me, because I know he's looking that up right now to find out what his name is. But the Alf TV series... if anybody remembers, the Alf TV series was a long time ago, and it was kind of a weird TV show about an alien that liked to eat cats that lived with a family. And there was
very popular at the time.
It was.
Me.
It was very popular.
Max Wright.
Yeah, I guess he was dealing with cancer, and at the end it got him, and so he passed away this recently. So to him, to our fans, to everybody that watches and listens, you are greatly appreciated. Cheers.
Cheers.
Before we get started, I'm going to switch over my camera, and we will watch me make stupid mistakes on models.
I mean, why should they be a different day?
Yeah, not going to be. I am working on I forgot to change the settings on the camera so it doesn't autofocus, but working on the Brute Thrall from Conquest, which comes out next week or this week. I can't remember. The game comes out, and it'll be out for people to buy and play. which I think is actually a pretty cool, good game. I did find out something about the models. Okay, now everybody was asking, it was like, why do they have these round bases and they slide into the square bases? Because you play on these square, regiment formations. They said the reason why you have a round base that goes into a square base or whatever, four-sided base that they have is because when you're playing, if you have a model that moves over the edge of the base, you just turn the base instead of turning the square.
Oh, okay.
So, like, this one moves over the blade of his weapon, goes over his base a bit. You just rotate the circle, and now you can still get flush and even with your opponent.
Yeah,
and
that's
still,
a good idea.
Plus, you can keep your formation even as guys die in case you have healing to bring them back.
Correct. Yeah. And you just go blink, and you're just done. Which I thought was an interesting, because there was the huge model, the Abomination, that they have. He can actually get over the base quite a bit, and so he was showing how to play on another channel. And he says, oh, well, I can't get in base because my model's overlapping. And he just rotated the guy on the base and goes, now you can. And they're like, okay, that's kind of cool. So one of the things we're going to do today is I'm going to try to finish doing the base on this guy. I'm going to do a brown base, highlight it up a little bit, and then I want to do snow on him. I'm going to use the GW snow. I don't want to get crazy with it. I just want to kind of put it in blotches around.
Can you kill your autofocus?
Yeah, it's fine. It's really
is it going crazy? Guys, it may crash the video, so hold on a second. Let me see if I can do that. I can see it going crazy. Let me see if I can do that.
Stop going crazy, autofocus. You had one job. It's autofocus. You can't even do that one job right.
Let's see if I can change that up.
Hashtag fire autofocus.
But, I'm going to try to do that. TG Archon.
Oh, hey, Archeon. That's Adam.
Adam. Let's see if I can do this.
And Crimson's here, too. Welcome.
Crimson is here? What? Hey, Crimson. Okay, so we'll take off the autofocus.
Yeah, it's kind of like seizure-inducing a little.
Yeah, so here.
Yeah,
I'm going to put it where I commonly would.
That's a good picture. You can see pretty good there.
Yeah, let me see if I can just...
Watch us not talk so that we can watch.
We can watch Gonzo play with the camera to make it look better.
Settings.
Fix the
Kathy,
settings.
we don't have to talk. We can just mana.
In case you didn't notice, I did put up a behind-the-scenes video recently of what we do when we're getting ready for a show.
What we do in the shadows?
What we do in the shadows. And I put it up on YouTube and on Facebook. And it is where we kind of test out the mics and get everything going to make sure everything sounds okay. It is actually quite hilarious listening to John and Kathy make stupid remarks.
We are not funny. Also, all of our remarks are intelligent.
Yeah, whatever.
Absolutely.
So, I'm going to work on these two models and try to get this base done. And then I'm going to put some flock on the bottom of these walls that I 3D printed for A Song of Ice and Fire. The bushes.
Those are solid walls.
The bushes look kind of cool.
The
walls
brick
look like
walls. And then they got a stone wall. And then this is our painted up walls that Kathy had a conniption fit over.
Oh, and you don't want to know what I thought those
barricades
were just the plastic.
Yeah.
It's not appropriate.
It was definitely not appropriate. It was quite a humorous thing on my Facebook page. And then the barricades. And each one of them has something different. These two walls, actually these three walls.
Don't look anything like bears.
Do what?
I said you can't fool me. They don't look anything like bears.
No. These three walls pretty much almost do the exact same thing, so they're not too much in it. But it also is cool to have different type of walls instead of just one static wall. Mm-hmm. But I've got to put grass on those walls. I'm going to try to finish this base. I'm going to do dirt spatter and highlight that up with just some dry brushing, and then put a little bit of static grass and some snow. And that's going to be about all I'm going to work on today. Kathy, you working on anything today?
Right now, no.
Your drink?
She's working on that ginger.
I have paper and a pen in front of me so that I can take notes, because every time I think of something to say, I forget what it is. So now I'm going to write it down.
So, guys, we're going to talk about terrain. We have covered terrain in the past. We have gone over a few things. But last week, we kind of hit a hot button. The hot button came up about Privateer Press and how they're removing hills. And we wanted to bring up something about it. And we know that it kind of hit a sore spot with some people. There were some other things that happened, but we wanted to cover it a little bit more in detail and also cover it not only just hills in Privateer Press's game, but terrain and others, and how they can. What's the purpose of it? It's not just to look pretty, and it's not there just to, cause a lot of problems with people trying to run tournaments, because that's also another issue of terrain. Is that, but to kind of get more of a big feedback. So I want to start off with. You mean exactly, Crimson? That's the reason why we want to talk about that.
Well, actually, yeah, that is part of the topic. Is mouse pads, flat terrain versus 3D terrain.
Yeah,
and there's been a bit of that's been contentious for a while.
Yeah, as everybody knows, Warmachine and Hordes, for the most part, uses 2D terrain, and it is by choice. There is no thing that says that you have to use 2D terrain. Everybody knows that. But by choice, because it makes it, and I'm talking from a tournament aspect right here, that a lot of tournament players like 2D terrain because it is easier to put models on, you can be more precise, so on and so forth.
Well, allow me to retort.
Yeah, but let me go. Well, John's going to take the casual aspect. I'm going to take the tournament aspect, and we're gonna talk about the reasons why. But absolutely. I want to hit first things first. Let's talk about PP's choice to remove hills from the game.
Okay. It's a terrible idea.
I agree. I think removing a terrain piece from the game is a horrible idea.
Especially when it's a common type people already have. They're in every Muse on Minis packs. You get 2 hills that are flat hills. And to be fair, hills are one of the things I have no problem with being flat. Like hills and trenches, no worries about that at all. Anything that is always going to cause a problem for models. Yeah. Like even the best hills, which are those plastic jubby hills where they got this sort of little bit of step, then a steep incline, and then the plateau sort of on top. I like those hills, but even those can cause problems.
Correct.
Anytime you get a model that's a little top heavy, especially the metal models, they'll topple right over it. And if you're using sand and gravel on a table for scenery stuff, it's like sandpaper on your paint job.
Yep. Or if you're using like foam, like people have done in the past, that model comes around and like the spear sticks into the ground and you're like, what just happened? So there's some problems there. But yeah, getting rid of a common terrain type is a bit silly.
Good night, Adam. Have a good night.
Night, Adam.
Right.
So we all think that it's a bad choice for them to remove that.
Let me take care of Kazakubical real quick. So Kazakubical actually in Warmachine and Hordes, hills do not block line of sight.
Correct.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. They probably should, but neither here nor there. They don't. They actually only give you extra line of sight seeing over models, and they give you a bonus versus ranged attacks.
Correct. It is the only, and so this is where it comes up in the tournament aspect. Hills, depending on what your TO does and depending on how he sets it up, certain buildings can block a line of sight to certain things. But if you're on a hill, you can see over things because of elevation bonuses and height restrictions and all this other stuff. But, because that was brought up recently at a big tournament where the Colossal was able to be completely on a hill and see over everything and shoot at something that it commonly wouldn't have been, because most people know that most terrain pieces aren't big enough to fit a Colossal.
Yes, they had hills that were too large. A Colossal could fit completely on it, kept it completely on it to get the bonus, and it caused some problems. So their reaction is to get rid of hills rules, which is an overreaction of the highest order. And I mean, I don't want to sound too negative because I was called out. Maybe I was a little negative last time, but it's really lazy.
Well, it's also, don't think that it's also not the. We can't say definitively that that's what Privateer Press did, but we can understand that that's could be one of the reasons why.
Yeah, I'm sure it is a reason why. It may not be the only reason why. I'm sure there's a bunch, and it was not a decision they made easily.
Correct.
But it is taking out a terrain piece rather than making the rules for it work in your game is lazy.
Well, because there's also to think about this. For people that know that play the game, elevation bonus. You get plus to your defense to be hit from range attacks. Mm-hmm. Great. Used to be a really good thing to do to protect your caster, protect other models. They'd have a good high defense, a 15 plus, put them up on a hill, they're 17, you're like, yes, now I can hardly be hit, and it's a little bit more protection. And it's the only bonus you could get against spray attacks.
Yes.
Spray attacks ignore everything except for elevation bonus. Now that elevation bonus is gone, there's no protection. Sprays are going to be pretty dominant, or are going to be, able to do, and people I'm sure are going to be afraid of them more. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on how many sprays you have. For armies that have a lot of sprays,
let's just say it's a meta-changing thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to judge for tournament capacity. It's a meta-changing thing, and that is often good and bad, equal measures of both.
Correct.
But that's for them to figure it out. What Crimson 1919 brought out is that they're taking out of the rules, and the only real rules that PP has is tournament rules right now. So if you take out tournament rules, that means there's no casual play for it, and casual play for Warmachine isn't exactly huge right now anyways, but that means there is no casual rules for it, which could further hurt a portion of the game that they're already having problems with, in my opinion. Yeah. So from a Warmachine and Hordes perspective, it is multiplicatively bad, because not only is it sort of, like I said, sort of lazy rather than fixing it. It's you're getting rid of something that people have readily available. There's only so much terrain people have readily available, and you're getting one of the common types, and one of the few types that is generally okay to throw a mouse pad out for, that no one has any problems with. Yeah, because hills are a pain in the ass to get on. So yeah, so that's things they need to look at more. And I'm sure they had a hard, long discussion, and they're not making this lightly. And we can, of course, tear it to shreds from over here in our chairs with our drinks. But
I think the one thing if we were to change and say, hey, this is what we think they should have done, if they wanted to remove hills, I think what they should have done is just remove the line of sight bonus from being on it.
No. You're thinking way too hard, Gonzo.
Okay, what do you think?
Simple rule: Colossals cannot get a line of sight bonus from hills. We're done.
Okay.
That solves the actual problem they were worried about.
So, are they already just super tall?
Colossals?
I don't play Warmachine, so
correct.
I don't know.
Colossals do.
Model.
Yeah,
your line of sight's all based off your base size and being able to see over things potentially.
Okay.
And it's also volume of the model.
See way further, because the hill the hill seeing over models is based off their base size. So
it gives them an advantage that shouldn't be there, in my opinion. But yeah, that could be another one.
Real nice sized. It's very similar size.
Yeah.
Are there other models that share that base size?
Yes.
Could they just say any model that has this base size doesn't get that bonus?
Sure, they could just say huge base models don't get that bonus.
They could.
You can even say that's all the way. Even they don't get any bonus from hills. So that way they don't get the defense bonus. They don't get any of the bonus. I mean, there's nothing broken at that. That's super easy, fixed. Bob's your uncle. Yeah. I mean, there's no problem there.
And looking at it for me as a tournament organizer, I've got to figure out more terrain now, because all my hill terrain is worthless.
It's nothing.
I can't use it. And so I'm like, oh, crap.
Do they have forests, too? I mean, does it become like people just use more forests or something?
We've got to figure out what we can use instead of it. Because usually, on a table, you usually have about 6 to 8 pieces of terrain for Warmachine and Hordes. And it's very centered There's like you can't put it within a certain radius of other things, and you can't put it in certain areas, just so you don't.
There's a lot of esoteric rules made for gameplay, not for aesthetics.
Correct. But you you do have forests, and now I've got to figure out what all I can put on the terrain. So it's not completely all forest, because if you have an all forest, if you put forest in the place of hills, you now give circle a very good advantage.
Oh, sure, okay.
Well, let's. I'm actually glad you brought that up, Kathy, because that brings up the next level of discussion I want to make about privacy press terrain. Is that forests, which are the most common type of terrain out there, actually give models bonuses in some cases. The amount of different terrain types they have that are, let's say, viable. Is viable a good word for it?
Sure.
Viable is very few. And that's sort of problematic. And now there are ways to go further. We had people, we had these little, shag carpet sort of bits we'd put out as for like cornfields or whatever. And we would call those concealment, which is cool. You run through a cornfield, it's kind of harder to see you and shoot you. Cool. Mm-hmm. Not everyone does that. They're not in the rule book, so it's sort of like almost a house rule for terrain.
Sure.
And that's sort of the thing about Warmachine Horse trains. It's all very specific and for tournament play, as Crimson brought up earlier. And that can cause some problems. And they really, and it's not just them. I said I said on Twitter last week to somebody that most of the miniature games out there have really not good terrain rules. We had a little bit of discussion. If it's not historical, the terrain rules are probably less than good. And that's why we're having this discussion. And I think in an effort to make their game as balanced as possible for tournament play, which is what they have for competitive play, Privateer Press has sort of taken the soul out of terrain for them. I mean, we already talked about the 2D terrain, which is problematic because a lot of people don't like it. People, and I understand the perspective that, there's so many people playing, you got to have terrain for everyone. Absolutely. But to bring a counterpoint, they don't necessarily share. But my buddy Marshall said that's bullshit because Adepticon can have full 3D terrain for all their 40K tables. Why can't we get more?
We all spend a lot of time. A lot of volunteers spend a lot of time throughout the year to make that happen, but make it happen, we do.
Absolutely. So if you take that, and it's absolutely true, you guys, a lot of volunteers doing a lot of good work, isn't Warmachine Horde supposed to have a great hobby community? Why the hell aren't they stepping up and doing it too? Yeah. Come on, guys.
Now, there are people that do that.
Absolutely.
And kudos to them, because like I said, there's a big problem. A lot of people want, let's get this thing. PP does want 3D terrain. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. A lot of players want 3D terrain. And it's not that. There are very few people that don't want 3D terrain. And we were talking about that. We were talking about the hills. Hills are one of the objects that are a big problem. And it's just because putting a model on it and falling over and so on and so forth. We understand that. But for the most part, most players want 3D terrain of some sort.
Yep. And we actually discussed it, and we think the best answer is what we call 2.5D terrain, where you have a mouse pad down for everything.
Yep.
And if it's a forest, you put trees on top of it. I do that with terrain.
You put your 3D terrain on top of your mouse pad, and then when it's time to, for the terrain to take effect in the game, you take your 3D terrain off. Here's your mouse pad. Now you know exactly where your terrain was, and you play through.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people that are doing that. I'll go back to what the NashCon guys did. They built 3D houses. They still put the 2D terrain on there, and then they put the 3D model on top of it. One, so it looks 3D and it looks cool. Two, if the building gets knocked over, you don't care because the mouse pad's not going to get moved.
Nope.
And three, it makes the game so much better when you have 3D terrain.
Absolutely. And I hate to say this, I am not. We're talking about Warmachine Horde. I'm not being negative about them, but if everyone wanted 2D terrain, that's fine. Just play with 2D models. You're basically playing a board game.
Which is funny is we brought that up whenever we were talking about last week because Hungerford even said that.
Yeah,
because he brought up about what happens if you knock over one of your models. Oh no, we have to play with 2D models now. which nobody wants to do that. And we're not going to do that. And it was a great, funny joke for Hungerford to say that. But he is right. The game is not that important for the most part for you to worry about it. Because when you're playing and I'm going to put this model down, I'm going to make sure that I'm outside of your model's threat range. And you are because you've said you are. And you knock over the model, all you got to do is pick that model back up, remeasure it, and you're good to go.
Yeah. And honestly, if the game is more important to you than that, I have a local who stopped playing Warmachine of Hordes and started just playing Magic again and Warhammer Underworlds because he said it stuck in his craw. No matter how good of people you are, someone's going to be a little upset back in their head if something gets knocked over, and something always gets knocked over, and you're not going to have a perfect game state. And, fair. He's right. If that is that important to you, then absolutely. You're going to have to make changes.
Yeah.
But
honestly,
this is an
maybe
imperfect
it's
hobby.
Yeah, maybe it's not the game for you, and that's fine.
And we're still Warmachine of Hordes. We're going to finish Warmachine of Hordes to go into other stuff momentarily. But Warmachine of Hordes, again, we reiterate with this. This is because all they have right now is competitive play.
That's so funny, Crimson, because
Yeah.
I was about to say, for me, terrain is there. It's there to create the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's there to create the world, just like the miniatures are there to create the world. If you're not creating a world of 3D fantasy or sci-fi with your models and your terrain, then you might as well be playing Advanced Squad Leader with your little cardboard chits.
Hey, don't be disrespecting Advanced Squad Leader.
No, it's a great game. Don't get me wrong. It's a very different sort of a game. It's got a lot of strategy, and if that's the kind of thing you like, then perhaps that's the game you should be gravitating towards.
Well, I mean, Crimson says playing it out on hexes. That is one of the main reasons why Dust is played on hexes. They have rules to play it with measuring tapes, and you can measure out where you want to go, but they're like, it's just so much easier. You know exactly where the model is, where it's going to be, how it's going to interact, all that. So you don't have to worry about invalidating game state. You know where it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But you lose immersion. Is it worth it?
There is that.
That's a question you have to answer for yourself. We can't answer that for you.
Correct.
Is it worth it? I've played, so BattleTech is always the big one, the first sort of proto-war game of hex grids and then potentially models, and they had the cardboard cutouts and all. And when we eventually, as a club, got together enough money and we bought actual terrain for it, started putting up these big tables of actual terrain using geohex and stuff, and using a tape measure and everything, it was so much more awesome.
Yeah.
Just to have that there. Even just the simple stuff like even crappy painted battle mechs. And let us tell you, our early battle mechs were painted crappy. None of us have any skills. We hadn't really met GW much, but back then. But it was so much more epic to have that, that 3D terrain there. I think we need to look at that. It think about yourself on the top tables at Warmachine Weekend, Warfare Weekend, or whatever, or Lock and Load, and suddenly you've got that awesome 3D table you're playing on. Doesn't that make the game so much more awesome?
Makes it super cool.
It does make it super cool.
I remember many a times back when it was Warmachine Weekend, and Chris would build. People would die to see what Chris's new table was for the championship table. Other people got to play on it, yeah, sure, but people were like, "Ooh, what's the table that he did?" Now, don't get me wrong; they weren't the greatest tactical, or perfect table for everything, but everybody wanted to play on it. Everybody wanted to do it.
I'm kind of glad you brought that up, Gonzo, because that brings up another common myth and misconception of terrain. And that is the quote-unquote fair terrain layout. Let me tell you, folks, the whole point games are set up where one side chooses which side they play on. That's usually considered an advantage, is because terrain is not supposed to be fair for both sides. There should be an advantage or a disadvantage to one side or the other in any game.
Yeah, I bring that up a lot whenever we play, in a tournament, and it's like, there's no advantage to choosing terrain side, so I'll just go first.
Yeah. Whenever I would have terrain set up, I would have one of the non-competitive guys who's a miniature gamer who's working at GW with me, named the Jason. He's the Jason. Don't call him just Jason. He's the Jason. I would have him go through and help and set up terrain. So he'd set up all terrain, all the tables, and then we'd go after and make it, if you will, legal. People are like, this is crap. I'm like, nope, there's an advantage to one side. Now you have to make a hard choice whether you want to go first or if you want the advantage.
Correct. And there should be.
They were all very picturesque, very cool. There's little villages and all that. If you don't get so caught into stickler rules and making it quote-unquote fair, which is, of course, impossible, you can make very picturesque, awesome things. Like maybe your column's coming into a village to attack, and maybe they're defending the village. They get an advantage because they chose to get the advantage.
Yeah, but you also don't, I want to go back in that, you also don't want to make it so one-sided that the other person has no feasible way to play.
No.
I bring this up because I went to a tournament, and this guy was bringing Colossals, and pretty much one half of the board was nothing but walls. I looked at him and said, you're screwed. I've won before you even put your army down. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm choosing this side of the board without all the walls. And he goes, well, I got to take this one. And says, yeah, now you can't move. I win automatically. And he's like, this is a very bad terrain set up. And I go, yes.
That's when you call the judge and tell him you got to fix
Correct.
this.
Yeah, and we worked on that. I'm just saying that setting up a terrain and a table for terrain is just not, you don't just put a bunch of stuff and go, yeah, it's good. You got to make sure that it's advantageous to everybody, but not one-sided.
Yep. And actually, Devil Squid did that once in one of our games back at Drop Zone. There's one table, I'm like, I have to leave my non-colossal list open to play because if I get that table, I can't play my colossal list on it.
Yeah. You just have to be... You don't just play stupid, too. You don't, and TOs need to make sure that they're not putting out stupid tables.
Yeah, and Crimson brings up a lot of good notes there. He brings up, I think one thing terrain does, does your terrain tell a story? It should. Like, goes on to say, do you have single trench templates lying around randomly or multiple trench templates lined up as if they were trenches? Now, you could have single trenches. Those are really called false foxholes or whatever. Are your houses randomly placed, or lined with trees, fences, whatever? And he talked about the Steamroller packet, which has these rules about 8 pieces of terrain arranged randomly, and it just ends up looking like mousepad vomit. Yeah. It does. But you can sort of fix that. There's no, as a TO or a gamer, if you're just playing a regular game, once you've generated terrain by whatever random method that may or may not exist in your game system, you guys can talk about, like, let's move this here. What we'll often do locally is we'll set up a terrain board, and it'll be sort of thematic, and then someone goes, look at the guy like, what do you think? And they'll move a couple things around, then we'll move a couple things some more, and then we're both like, that's good, we'll go. We've even so far as Not Brusha Davis sat in on a game that myself and Paul was playing. I was setting up terrain, and he just looked and said, like, all right, turn these this way, because we're playing Legion, and Legion can attack from the long edges, too. He wanted to make sure that all the terrain was good to cover line of sight, block line of sights, and break up fire lanes from every angle.
Yeah, because you definitely don't want a huge fire lane where I can shoot from one side of the board to the other side without having some type of cover.
Yeah, absolutely. People on the Legion Facebook page talk about how range 4 is so powerful and all this. And then a guy, after a similar thread on the FFG forum, said, it's because you're not using terrain right. And I absolutely agree.
Yes.
A lot of these problems, people are like, oh, too much of this, too much of that. You're not using terrain right. Like, we use a lot of super huge buildings to break up line of sight for 40K at the local store. And it does a great job of doing that.
Yeah.
It looks cool buildings, just basically painted super cool. And then you're like, I can't just shoot. Even my knight can't just shoot through this building. I've got to actually maneuver, either take the shots you give me or have to maneuver a lot to get the good shots. And it makes the game so much more interesting.
Yeah. Just being able to stand still. I know I play Tau and I'm used to it. I can just stand still and shoot across the board. But you shouldn't 100% all the time get to do that. That's a problem with the game state.
No, in fact, you should rarely get to do that. I mean, and honestly, 40K is a whole different thing where, honestly, aside from blocking line of sight, some of the terrain didn't do a lot originally. It does now, since the most recent chapter approved, I think it was, put all the terrain rules in there. And there's a lot of interesting terrain rules that are very, in some cases, harsh as fuck. And in some cases, not doing much, but at least all the terrain does something now. Yeah. Every kit they're putting out now has rules for sort of what it does, and that's cool. And GW goes a long way for that. Not everyone has the same ability to put out terrain like they do, unfortunately. If they did, man, wouldn't it be awesome?
Well, it also goes back, that you've got to, if your game has where ranges are super important, i.e., range 4 in Legion, 28 inches and, whatever, you need to be looking to make sure that it's not exploitable to the point that that person's going to win before turn 1 is even done. And it goes
Yeah,
back to table setup, which is very
table
important.
terrain is one of those things that I think not every company takes seriously, and not every gamer takes seriously when they're putting it on the table. It should be collaborative. Like, maybe not necessarily as far as I go to we do that. Sometimes people just go like, all right, I put a piece of terrain down, you put a piece of terrain down, and then back and forth, which is cool. That'll work too.
Song of Ice and Fire. Song of Ice and Fire you have a pool of terrain. If it is not set up by the TO to begin with, but if it isn't, say you're doing a casual game at the store, there you have a pile of terrain. You roll off, first person gets to pick a piece of terrain. All right, I'm going to pick this one up and put it here. All right, I'm going to take this piece of terrain and put it here. You only get 4 pieces of terrain, which I thought was weird at first, but it works with the game. And they can't be within a certain distance of each other and certain things like that, which is good because it lets people maneuver around things and so on and so forth. But it also gives you advantage because there are some terrain pieces that affect your morale. The corpse pile affects your morale. If you're within a certain distance of it, your morale is lowered. But then, and if you play for say Lannisters, that's a good piece of terrain to have out there because you don't have a problem with because a lot of your abilities are based off of people losing their morale and gives them losses to their life. So terrain actually makes a big difference whenever you're playing that game and choosing what terrain pieces. Now, of course, when you're in a tournament setting, you're not going to be able to have all that terrain. It's usually set up already, but it is important to choose
But it doesn't have
sides.
to be. It doesn't have to be.
No, but I mean, if I'm
But it's a
looking,
part of the game, the TO can just put, here's your 8 terrain pieces,
correct,
and part of the game can be setting them up.
could be. But I'm saying if you go to it, and sometimes you don't have a lot of time for that due to the restraints of whatever they're playing. But if you go to, I'm taking Adepticon for a thing because they had a Song of Ice and Fire, and the terrain's already set up, and I know that I'm playing Lannister as my army, and my army affects all my abilities affect morale. I'm going to choose the side that doesn't have a corpse pile on it and make my opponent have the corpse piles on it. And I know that if he's within short distance of that corpse pile, he's at -1. I'm going to hit that model with all of my negative effects that I can to make him lose as many guys as possible. Because that is a tactical advantage you need to look when you're playing with terrain. You just don't let it just go, oh, terrain doesn't matter. No, in that game, with a Lannisters, giving a -5 to -6, and you could lose, 7 or 8 guys out of a unit right before they even get started and get to do anything devastating, yes, that is very important. So,
But then again, also as a TO, maybe that's a terrain piece you put more towards the middle, so it doesn't affect immediately, but it'll have effect in the middle of the game.
correct.
That's another thing is people. Sometimes I find people put all this terrain deployment zone in the middle of the board's like a fucking no man's land. Like,
Oh,
that's not how we're playing this. You need to actually do sort of the opposite. Less terrain immediately in the deployment zone. There should be a little bit there, and then a bunch just outside, so people have to move, and then a bunch in the center of the table.
yeah,
Should
well,
not be a killing zone for any game.
yeah, most scenarios for a Song of Ice and Fire says you can't place it in the deployment zone.
Which is it's a good rule.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for every game. Actually, Moondoggy brings up one of the reasons he played Infinity for so long was the terrain and all the things you can do with it in that game. Absolutely, Infinity probably has the most formed sort of idea of what terrain should be.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still broken down. There's sort of the U.S. school of thought, which is very, very terrain heavy, and the European school of thought, which is a little more moderate. There's still some fire lanes, but not any you start with. There's some like if you move in a little bit. It's a little different. Not quite the same sneaking through terrain, but it is a very good terrain thing. And actually, they have tons of rules to take advantage of multiple levels. They have rules so that even if you put motherfuckers up in the clock tower, somebody can go up and get him because they got the ability to climb up there or jump up there.
Oh, yeah.
They have a lot of rules. They put a lot of thought into it, and it pays off when you play that game. Now, granted, it does make that game a bit more complicated, but it's all good complicated and makes the game more stunning visually and more immersive, and it helps.
Well, the thing is certain games you have to have a lot of terrain. And to me, going back with Infinity, Infinity is one that requires you to have a lot of terrain. If you did not have a lot of terrain in Infinity or 40K, the games would be over in seconds.
I mean, 40K
Easily.
probably get away with it because, I mean, that's how people play 40K as it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, Infinity would not work.
No. The games would be over too quickly, and you'd be like, well, that wasn't fun. Especially with reactive fire.
Yeah.
AROs in that game.
Age of Sigmar, where the terrain matters significantly less, but it's not your cool piece. Though they are getting better at making more terrain do stuff in that game as well. But I find that game has very little terrain put out, and it should have more, and it should have more defined what does it do. Forests pretty much only provide, a defensive bonus if someone attacks you. They're not harder to move through or anything. They've got rid of a lot of that, which is weird. I mean, I like the 40K style rule where if you go through a forest at any point, you take -2 to your charge rolls. Well, that's cool.
That made sense.
Same with a crater and stuff. Excuse me. But there's a lot of little rules you can do, and we'll do a lot of fucking winging it on rules. And don't think, if you guys are playing with your buddies, you can do a lot of winging it with rules. You can go like, what does this do? It's water. Just like everything else, it's small water, so it's, maybe it's -4 because it's water. It's really even harder to go through and charge, unless you got flying or something.
Well, I mean, PP did get rid of deep and shallow water. If anybody remembers, deep water.
Did they get rid of shallow water?
Well, it's just water, pretty much. I mean, they got rid of deep. There's no deep and shallow
deep
water.
And shallow water is now just water.
Yeah. And if anybody remember, deep water, if your warjack was knocked over, it was out of the game.
Any model that went into deep water that was not amphibious died.
And then you had shallow water, and if your model was knocked over, warjack was knocked over, could put it out and so on and so forth. So it was like,
wasn't that characterful and cool?
It was.
That seems like it would be really frustrating. Although, if you know that water does that to you, why would you walk through it then?
Sometimes you got to. You're like, I need to get to that guy. Sometimes you take the chance. Does he have a knockdown effect that he can get to me? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I've gone through water knowing full well what could happen to my warjack. I had no problem if it happened because I went in expecting it.
Yeah. I mean, I know I went to a tournament and this guy came up to me and came through the water and had a warjack, and of course this was back in Mark II. Came up and he had 3 warjacks in the water, and they all 3 got knocked out. They all got knocked down, and that was it for the warjacks. And he was like, well, that sucks. And I go, you knew what water did.
He took a chance.
Yeah.
You roll them dice and it comes up bad. It happens. There's actually one game where my opponent's like, let's call that one deep water, so it's basically impassable. I'm like, staring down at Shay, going, okay. Shay gets in trouble. Shay jumps in deep water. He's amphibious. He's fine. He can't get to me. Literally cannot get to me.
Crimson tried to post a link.
Nope.
Sorry about that, Crimson.
Crimson, if you need to post a link, send it to me. I'll post it for you.
But he said I didn't post a link.
What did it try to do?
It thought he posted a link.
Well, let me see what you got here. So, Crimson said, hot take, the 8 pieces of terrain and steamroller package sheet all placed in the center 30 by 30 square of the board. Then add more terrain on the edges just for decoration. Absolutely true. That is perfectly cool. I think that's even the way it should be.
Now, there's a lot of people.
I don't understand why that looks like a link. Also, I agree with that sentiment, too.
And then he said, random thought, what about rules that allow players to deploy extra terrain pieces to represent having strategic advantage, such as, the grand scheme of things, my army has better logistics? It's an interesting idea, but then you sort of get into the current problem with the, what's the name of your fucking faction there in Age of Sigmar, Gonzo?
The Sylvaneth?
The Sylvaneth, where they bring 1,000,000 trees and things start to get unfun real quick.
Yes.
Now, terrain pieces that don't do as much, absolutely, that could be kind of cool. And then he says, the one interesting thing with those old water rules, they punished warjacks, not war beasts. In Mark II, where warjacks still sucked and didn't need to be punished more. Correct. But, again, I would say, with no harshness, they kind of overreacted to that problem. It streamlined it, but it did take away a lot of the character of the game when they could have done it differently. Cool.
Wall's done. I flocked him. I flocked it very good.
Interesting. Anyways, well, There you go. That's what he was talking about. I agree with most of those statements, though. The extra terrain would be interesting. What you do is you do what GW does right now with Age of Sigmar, where basically every faction that comes out now has a terrain piece that is basically free and they get to use.
Yeah, they get to
Now,
summon it out.
well, no, not summon it. It starts on the. You put it on the table when you deploy.
Oh, well, some of them are summonable.
Well, they're gonna. If you think that's gonna last through the next edition of the rules, you might have another thing coming. I think they're gonna get rid of that because it makes it hard to play the game.
Correct.
I would hope so. It is one of the biggest negative impacts. But in any case.
Prime example, I play Sylvaneth, and I can bring out, depending on how I build my army, I could bring out 3 Sylvaneth Forest a turn. Of course, with placement of terrain.
Turn.
Yes. Not my turn, I can place out 3 forests right off the bat.
And there's no, max that you can place?
Nope.
I mean,
there are rules that I can't be within certain.
Well, there are rules now that you can't deploy them a certain distance, which is going to help a lot.
Yeah, I don't know what the full rules are. We haven't got our General's Handbook, and I haven't got this. And the Sylvaneth book isn't out yet, so we don't know what the full changes are.
Yeah,
but
we
it
don't know
used
what
to
they're
be.
going to change.
Yeah,
they're probably going to remove a lot of the. Because you start off getting 3 extra forests also.
I start off with the ability to have 1 Sylvaneth forest that has 3 pieces of it. It's a possibility of having 3, but all 3 must be placed within 1 inch of each other.
And those GW forest templates that we use all the time.
So
yeah.
Not
a small amount of terrain, and this is kind of problematic. It makes the game unfun.
Correct, because then on top of that, my first turn I can walk up with 1 model, put down another forest, walk up with another model, and put up to 3 things down, not just 1, up to 3, and so on and so forth. With 3 different models. So technically, if terrain was there and I was able to do it, I could put 12 pieces of forest out by turn 1 if I go first.
Yeah, and
that's ridiculous.
It is.
Totally ridiculous.
I played a friend of mine and we were doing that, and I was like, I'm going to show you what it is. And he's like, this is not fun. And I go, yeah, because if you try to go through it, you will have problems.
Yep. So there's that too. But aside from that, the other armies they put out, as they put them out, they put out a terrain piece. Like the Gloomspite have their terrain piece that comes out and gives them little bonuses and all if they're near it. And then, the Khorne guys have it. They've been putting it in every list. It's very, very characterful and very interesting. I think even the Ionith Deep can have a beast terrain they can either deploy as 1 larger beast terrain or 2 slightly smaller pieces of terrain, which is kind of cool.
I like the idea of the terrain pieces having bonuses to the army and having an ability like, okay, this is aka rough terrain, and so you move slower through it. And not like the Sylvaneth Wood, where if you run through it on a 1, you're just dead.
Yeah,
that's the real harsh reality of it. I like it. Like, okay, if you're within certain distance of a Sylvaneth forest, you get the ability to cast spells better or better morale, blah, blah, blah. If you're an enemy in it, you are slowed down on your charge. I like that better than you're just slain.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's there. What else do we have? Malifaux is always weird. They have very defined characteristics for terrain, and the new book, and I only had a small time to look into it because the local store didn't get enough for me to get a copy, but it is free online. I took a little look. They have definable characteristics, and then they have ideas of what each piece of terrain should be inherently. Obviously, you can change it if you wish, but it sort of tells you, like, oh, this is a building, it should be climbable, this and this and this.
I don't play Malifaux. I did buy one of the starters, or I'm buying one of the starter sets. Do a lot of models have the ability to climb?
No, climbable, anyone can do it. It just changes. It slows you down, basically.
Oh, okay. Because in Warmachine and Hordes, nothing is climbable, and so you just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's much more normal. Like, basically, you measure up, and that's how you climb.
Gotcha.
Sort of
like Legion and stuff.
Like the standard walls you would use in Warmachine, and you just sort of, if you have Pathfinder, you go over them, and if not, you can't charge over them, but you can just move over them, and it doesn't add any extra movement. Yeah. In Malifaux, you would literally measure the amount up and measure the amount down, and that is sort of a movement penalty for the wall.
Gotcha.
But hills were sort of weird. They're sort of similar to Warmachine and Hordes hills in Malifaux, and as a result, the players chose not to use them, but the rules are still there.
Correct.
And they weren't really that confusing, but it was a lot of the same stuff because models have specific sizes, sort of like the Warmachine. But Malifaux had a great, just characteristics. Like, okay, this is blocking terrain, this is not blocking terrain, all sorts of little stuff like that. And that's sort of, I think, the new way forward is they have keywords and heights and all, so you can sort of tell exactly what they're going to do for you.
Going back to Song of Ice and Fire, every model, every piece of terrain has a keyword. Impassable, fearsome, so on and so forth. So all you got to do is know what the keyword is, and then they tell you what that keyword means, which I think is what really needs to start happening on terrain pieces. And it needs to be a quick reference too. It just doesn't need to be just there. It's
honestly, knowing the name usually will spark something in your mind. So, like, correct. I know what that does. And they're usually fairly intuitive.
Correct.
So here's a funny thing, Gonzo. Crimson actually mentions there are terrorist obstructions are a thing in the core rules. You can go on top of them, but they're not in the steamroller packet, so no one uses them.
Correct. That's going into it. Which, going back to that, we do have more terrain within the steamroller packet because we have burning forests and clouds and stuff like that. And you can use 2D terrain for that. Sorry, I have an itch on my leg. But there's very few people that want to start using the burning forest, burning earth, or, acid pools because they're not used to it. And I'm like, no. If I'm going to go to a large tournament scene, Adepticon, Gen Con, something, LVO, I know that they're going to start, they're using those. I 100% am going to use it at my local store. And start getting stuff done.
They're in the packet. You should use them.
Correct. You should always use it because you never know what's going to happen when you go to that. You go to a tournament and they go, we use Burning Earth. And you're like, shit, what does Burning Earth do?
Legion mentioned he's interested in how different Legion terrain is. Legion terrain is very easy.
Yep.
Generally, if it causes a penalty, you just move down one speed and you go over it to a minimum of 1. Generally, it gives you cover, heavy or light cover. And if you get light and light, you got heavy, because it's cover 1, cover 2, basically. And then it has a height, so you can fly over it or climb it or clamber over it. Clambering's weird. It's probably the weirdest part of the rules, but it does mean you can climb up things that don't have easy access points, but you might lose dudes.
Which, going about Legion terrain, More Than Dice is now sponsoring one of the tables at Warfare Weekend for Star Wars Legion. I am printing all of our, watch my fingers, desert planet terrain, because that name is copyrighted. And we will be sponsoring a table with all of our stuff, so you can see it. I printed out a bunch of our walls, a bunch of doorways. I printed out some curved walls tonight. I'm going to print out, tomorrow I'm going to print out some curved walls, and then after that, probably about 10 days straight of printing buildings. I have a lot of desert buildings to print out.
To be honest, Gale Force 9 makes some good desert buildings as well. I have a bunch of them and have enjoyed them very much, and their walls are interesting, though I'd like a little more diversity in the parts in it so I can make bigger walls. But
yeah, well, I've got it set that's tall walls and short walls. So, but I want to have a More Than Dice table that is very thematic. And, Star Wars Legion tables, 100% can be that. If you went to Adepticon and saw those, holy shit, those were awesome. They had some amazing Star Wars Legion terrain, so you will have to see that, which we will have some really cool terrain at Warfare Weekend.
Yeah, terrain is honestly the biggest point where the 3D printing that everyone thought was going to destroy the model industry is really only affecting terrain.
Yes. I have 3D printed models before. They're not as great, although it is not a resin printer, and a resin printer you can get much better. But it still takes way too long to do.
And to get the really high quality ones, they're prohibitively expensive. Go on Shapeways sometimes, guys. Find a store that sells miniatures and look at their highest quality models. And then realize that they're significantly more expensive than what you were going to buy at the store.
Yeah.
Significantly.
It is something.
Alicia says, what about the Ice Valhalla or Vanilla Ice Planet terrain? Their Vanilla Ice Planet terrain. So here's the funny thing: here's a good point about getting rid of hills. To circle back around to the beginning, hills are pretty much the only kind of terrain you have on an ice planet. You have hills, maybe some cool impassable rock, ice columns and such, and trenches you dig, and then man-made stuff. Other than that, there's not really any appropriate terrain on a true ice planet. You can put some trees on there, but that kind of does not fit because they would not live on an ice planet. So, interesting there. You can't really have a water feature because it'd be frozen, and thus it becomes open ground.
Although, what you call it, Guild Ball does have where ice terrain makes you move a little bit faster. So there is that. You could have a frozen river grant you, if you move over, grant you plus 1 inches.
That's really odd.
Because you're slipping and sliding, so you run across and
never actually tried to run across ice.
Well, you run until you get to the ice.
Yeah,
and then you slide across it.
Got it. But, full marks for trying to make a terrain piece do something. Yeah. I'm down with that. But, so that's sort of the thing there. I mean, I think we covered a large amount of terrain. There's still other stuff. I mean, the people have this problem with impassable terrain, too. Like, they don't like putting it out when that's really, if you will, should be like the default piece that they have something on every table, whether it be a building you can't go in, or those giant rock spires or whatever. They're great because they block line of sight. If you get up close to them, they're generally cover, concealment, whatever you call it in the game. And they affect the game in a tactical manner where you have to go around them, you have to maneuver around them. Mm-hmm. And that is good.
Yes.
That's sort of the point we're missing in terrain in some cases, that if you never have to change the way you're playing because of the terrain on a board, the terrain has been done incorrectly somewhere down the line.
Destructible terrain is a very, very good point to bring up. There are very few games where you can destroy terrain. In Warmachine and Hordes, they did have that at one point. Because I know the Marauder was able to do it a lot easier. Warcaster did it. I can't remember which one. Was it Darius or Siege? I can't remember. Was able to destroy certain terrain. But it was removed out because of, 1, tournament play, and 2, hardly anybody used it. It really didn't do much.
And honestly, destructible terrain sounds great. Like buildings and all, bash a hole in. That's cool. I could see that working out well. But if you're talking like, pillars and stuff kind of in the way, it takes a lot more effort to destroy a giant piece of rock than you would think.
Yeah.
And also problematic, otherwise. I would love to see a game that made destructible terrain and had like the rules for what it happens. Like your forest can be destroyed by fire, becomes a burning forest, and then becomes, just rough terrain afterwards, but no cover or anything.
It would be one thing if you had a game where you had sappers.
Yeah.
Who that's their purpose, is to destroy the terrain or breach the walls or whatever.
Kathy, you're talking that historical shit again.
Oh, sorry. Ha ha ha.
No, actually, I like games where they have sappers or someone whose job is to do stuff like that. Actually, Infinity has a function where I don't know if it's still in the game, but at least in last edition or first edition, second edition, they had a thing where you could dig a foxhole. Some models could dig a foxhole and just where am I? Crap, foxhole, and they get a little bit of cover from that.
I'll go back to historical and say that in Bolt Action they do have rules for buildings that are destroyed and how you can move through ones that are already rubble, and what happens when you have a unit that's in a building that gets destroyed, like by aerial bombardment or something.
Yeah, some games have those rules in them. I want to say, actually, Old Fantasy had those rules. You find an Old Fantasy book, they had some rules for stuff like that, I'm pretty sure, for the castle and all.
40K still has some of those rules, but it's scenario play. It's not like normal. But it's scenario play, like, lava has hit this building and you're destroyed if you're on it.
Let's not open up that. That's a whole nother session. That's a whole other podcast topic there.
But yeah, there are some out there, but they're not used very often.
Yeah.
Crimson says, I wrote some basic rules for urban combat Warmachine. Basically, if you're in a building that's destroyed, you take fall damage depending on which floor you are on, plus an additional die for every story above you. And that's kind of similar to what Bolt Action does.
Hmm.
I don't remember it exactly, but that seems very similar.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that, but it just causes the extra bloat of terrain. Suddenly, you have to have the. If you're using the mouse pad with the building on top, it's fine because you just take off the building, you have the mouse pad, and the mouse pad is just the wreckage because it's flat
Mm-hmm.
if it goes over it. I mean, we've played games of 40K where they're like, no, well, things that can't go in buildings can't go in buildings. Then they have all these buildings. I'm like, well, you got to do something else because otherwise it makes dreadnoughts and the like and things that ain't go in buildings really fuck awful worthless.
Yeah, and if you can't
So
destroy the building so that they can walk through it,
and I think that's why so many game companies sort of, I don't want to go for the easier, less effective terrain because it creates a less negative play experience, but also creates a less immersive one. And they're
it's
more
so
interested in
weird
the
that
pop.
it would be considered a negative to have to think about and strategize around your terrain.
Well, no, I mean like buildings and not being able to get dreadnoughts and stuff in. If someone brings a cool, fun dreadnought army, suddenly you're like, I'm holed up in buildings. Fuck you, dreadnoughts.
Yeah,
I also remember old 40K rules. If you were in a building or something and someone hit the bottom floor with a flamer, everyone got hit. Not this
yes.
who's covered by a template bullshit. No, no, all of you, all of you. But and there are rules that can be done for that, and I hope eventually we get a game that does terrain rules right. As it is, I will settle for mediocre terrain rules because that's sort of the best we can find. Yeah, Moondoggy terrain tournaments should change to be more dynamic, but it won't because turn players don't want to be arsed with it. TOs don't want to be arsed to make their tournament. I mean, that's why if you look at 40K, certain things, whoever makes the first relatively good tournament packet becomes the standard. Like the ITC is pretty much the standard, and I don't really like ITC rules. I think they're okay, but I don't really like them. Sort of like Steamroll. Well, going way back machine. I don't know how far back Gonzo goes, but Steamroller wasn't always that way.
Oh yeah.
The Steamroller was originally apparently not very good, and then Hacksaw made Jackhammer rules until PP hired him to do Steamroller. But that is
No, I played. I remember playing the original Steamroller, and we called it playing football at one point. Oh, I've got so many corners and edges. I win the game. There was. I remember that. So yeah, no, I remember those days playing football.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Victory conditions in a game. We could do a whole podcast on that too, but not right now. Right now, I think you have an announcement. Since it's time for the media section, or I think you're going to keep painting.
Probably just keep painting a little bit. I mean, unless everybody wants to see the media screen, I can keep working on models and they can watch me do
Keep
that.
painting.
No, I was going to tell you that for the people that did get, I think, Moondoggy, did you get your stuff, by the way? I think somebody sent me something saying that they got their stuff and they were wondering how to put their stuff together. And I was like, I have no clue. Hopefully you figured that out.
Oh yeah, if not, we can message Arky Dan and find out.
Yeah, he'll let us know. But I told him to look on the page. I think it was Moondoggy. I don't remember. But you should have gotten a 3D printout of our AKA business cards. I'm gonna start making some of those and giving them out. And also, certain ones will be a Patreon reward because we are having an issue with dice. For the people that are part of our Patreon reward for that level, dice are taking 8 to 10 weeks to get out. And while we do have some dice for sale, we are having problems with shipping those too. We found out that the post office doesn't like us sending dice through the mail for some reason. Sending
Did they
one
want
dice.
it to be in some kind of a box or padded envelope?
Yes, and then it
Yeah.
takes that one dice and makes it a huge expensive things. So we're gonna try to figure out some better rewards for y'all for patron. Also, the patron reward of RPG will be going up pretty soon. For anybody that doesn't know, I will be role playing games for people. Right now, it's only going to be one person. I may up it to two. Depending on what it is. And what the patron reward is going to be is that I will run an RPG for you and for your friends, 3 or 4 of your friends, depending. And depending on the game, depends on what we'll play. And we will figure that out. But the one thing that we're going to have to do, good. What'd you think about everything, by the way, Moondoggy? The reward, even though it is, we do charge per episode, guys, but you know that we don't charge for every episode we put out. We only charge you 4 times. And so everybody goes, but there will be a charge that has to be done because I will run this twice a week. And if anybody knows about my RPG sessions, they aren't bullshit.
I mean, twice a month, right?
Oh, yeah, twice a month. Did I say twice a week?
You said twice a week.
Fuck that. No. I'd have to charge a whole lot more for what I plan on charging. But what it is we
do that, but shit.
I will set a higher price value on it, but you can set your Patreon to go, I will only pay that once a month instead of 4 times a month. So you can set it up. And if you're interested in me running a campaign for you, get with me. I'll work with you. Get some stuff figured out for it. I'm actually looking forward to it. There's quite a few game systems I want to try within genres that people want that actually work really good online. And actually, I was really surprised that there are actual professional DMs that charge like $100 per game session. And it's like $100 per game session, and it's only a 2-hour game session. And I'm like, dude.
Do you know how much money I should have?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a point in my 20s where I was running 4 games a week. And they were not 2-hour sessions. They were 3, 4 plus. Man, I should be rich.
So there's some things that we're going to do. I definitely want to get some stuff for people, and we want to have some better patron rewards. We also, Kathy, just a surprise for you. I know that your patron reward where you're teaching people and stuff, we now have it where you can do subscriber-only streams. And we are actually in that, so that may help you with your little Patreon reward, where you can do subscriber-only streams for those people. Stupid Nat. And we're trying to work that out. We got into the beta on it. Other than that, I can continue painting, or we go to the media screen. What do you want to go, guys? I can continue. I've got
painting. We can talk about media without the media screen. This is fun.
Okay, I just got to work on this. I got to check if it's not dry yet. I'm gonna work on something else. So let's see, John. How many media things you got?
1.
Holy shit!
I mean,
Kathy?
I can talk about 2 because I read a book too, so we'll call it 2.
Okay.
No.
Nothing, Kathy. I have only 2 this time.
What?
I know. Heard you can make $50 an hour DMing for people. Yeah, that's true. There are people that do. I looked it up. I was kind of curious.
No, you're not wrong. I've seen it before. I just don't understand that. I only roleplay. I only run for my friends, though.
Yeah.
So.
But we want to be able to make it a Patreon reward.
No,
but if you divide that up between
it's a good idea. It's just figuring out how to make it work. Logistics. You can be the penny gig, and then I'll figure out if it works. And if so, then I can tag team.
Well,
you can quit your day job.
No, my day job is worth. I mean, yeah, how about that?
I
mean, if you could fill an 8-hour day without just running games, sure, but I would probably shoot myself after a while. There's a point where you just run out of ideas.
Canary on this? You want to be a canary? Banyan, you put that reward up there. You get 3 or 4 of your buddies. We'll role play it. I'll let you be the canary on it. I actually have 3 things to talk about.
It just went up. He's watching media as we speak.
Watching media as we speak. No, what I do to remind myself of what to talk about on the podcast is I text myself. I will send myself a text to remind me of what to talk about. So I definitely do it with our media section, and I take all my stuff and put it in my phone and text it to myself to go, oh, I need to talk about XYZ. So that's something I do.
My style's more like, fuck it, I'll do it live.
I just put it on there so it reminds me. So first media section, first thing to talk about, I'll go first, of course. I watched another episode of Savage Builds.
Okay.
Everybody knows Adam Savage just builds shit and tests it out and tries to experiment with it and try to get it to work. This last week was him building cars for like Mad Max. And they were building Mad Max cars, and the object was each car had 3 targets. One on each side, passenger and driver side near the front, and then one on top of the car. And you had to you had to build your car so you could take out all 3 targets. And if you were the last person standing, you won. It was interesting, the different techniques that they used, and they had all these different weapons. And in the middle of the build, the last day before the build, their entire shop got robbed.
Fucker.
All their power tools, everything. And everybody knows about power tools. That shit's not cheap.
No.
And it was like whoever they had building with them, it was all their stuff. Adam had like this tool thing that was there, but I mean, they showed it. I'm sitting there watching the show, it comes back to commercial, and they show this lock that's cut on the ground, and I'm like, why are they showing this lock cut on the ground? And then they go inside, and all the power tools are gone. Someone had robbed their entire shop of all their stuff, and I was like, fuck. I mean, you hear about that and you know it happens, but you don't expect that for like TV shows and stuff, because you think that, it's just, they're TV shows. That's not going to happen. They're special, blah, blah, blah. No, they had all their shit stolen. So it was kind of a little upsetting for them, and it was kind of like a shocker for me. I'm like, okay, shit. Yeah, well, shit happens. But they made the best of it. They made their own things. They built their own machines. One person used a skeet shooter as one of their weapons to hit targets on top. Adam had a baseball pitch machine to shoot stuff. And they got together and they started fighting each other out for it. And it was pretty interesting. The people that had ammo lost all their ammo quite quickly. And so it came down to pretty much a crashing derby and hitting stuff. But the one person that won was a lady that had no shooting weapons. The weapons she had at the very top of her vehicle were like these maces on chains. And so she would drive and just make sure the maces hit the things on top. But it was pretty interesting. Really cool. I like the show. It's a lot of fun. I like Adam Savage anyway. He's a pretty cool guy. So go watch it. No space herpes yet because, well, it's only like 4 episodes in. Just going to wait till the end of the season to give a complete and to see if it stays around too, because that's another kicker. So
yeah, it always is. Even it could be the best show ever. Doesn't mean it's going to stay around.
Correct.
Hashtag Firefly.
Hashtag Firefly.
So my first one is I watched a movie this week. It's a movie from my childhood that I love very dearly. So if you're expecting a measured and balanced review, you can fuck right off. That is The Black Hole.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's right.
That is old school.
Yeah. Maybe I own the collector's tin. Don't judge me. I do own the collector's tin, in case you're wondering. In fact, I'm waiting to find a good Blu-ray copy of it. I'll buy that shit too. So The Black Hole is a 79 sci-fi movie done by Disney. Sort of trying to cash in on sort of the Star Wars feel, though honestly they pretty far afield from Star Wars aside from it being science fiction.
Yeah.
In fact, watching it this time, I'm able to sort of, with my more specific eye towards different things in a movie that I have nowadays, I'm able to more quantify the feelings I have for it. Now, I love this movie. So, get ready for it. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson says the science is shit. Yeah, I know the science is shit. It's science fiction. I don't fucking care. It's a very good mashup of multiple genres. Because the beginning is almost a suspense horror.
Yep.
And the middle is, a little more quasi-political, maybe a little more suspense. Still suspense. And then the end is sort of like an action disaster romp. And, I love it for it. In fact, I would say the only part the movie sort of really kind of falls down for is a bit at the end when they're boarding the probe ship to leave. And they had spacesuits because they're like, oh, we're getting spacesuits and all that because we're going to space. And then the spacesuits looked like ass, so they just didn't wear them, which was a good call. But, The action's cool. So the whole idea is they were following the crew of the Palomino, which is a United States space exploration ship with 6 crew members and a robot, or 6 crew members including the robot. And they come across a black hole, and sitting there on the edge of the black hole is a spaceship they eventually identify as the USS Cygnus, which is another early American ship that was reported missing. No one knows what happened to it. They go to investigate and eventually end up landing on the ship. It's just defying the black hole's gravity, which is like, what the hell's going on? And they get there. It gets a little suspenseful. They're disarmed by remote lasers. This whole thing where they're going through this empty ship, finally get to the bridge, and there's a bunch of robots there, and the big head robot Maximilian, who you've all seen, big red robot floating with the sort of spinning claw arms.
Mm-hmm.
He's very cool. I love the robot design on this. He is super cool. I love Vincent, the design of that. And then they meet Dr. Hans Reinhardt, who's the commander of the mission, and he's a bit eccentric to start, obviously a genius as he designed all this stuff. And the whole thing goes on that he says his crew went back to Earth, and he doesn't know what happened to him. And eventually comes out that he killed the crew, made the robots out of them, and he tries to keep some of them there. One of the members gets killed, the other one gets taken to get reprogrammed robot. They go rescue her, but the reporter who's with them, played by Ernest Borgnine, ends up being a scumbag and tries to leave without them and gets killed. So they have to go to the probe ship to get off the ship. And it's just a bunch. The ending is a whole big giant, small running gunfights. And none of the action is super spectacular, but it's all very cool and kind of fun and enjoyable. The suspense early on is great. It is very, very suspenseful. It's not quite like Aliens because you don't know what's going to happen, but it's very, very good suspense. I do love it. I love the robot design. The cast is top notch. You've got, just to go with the big ones now, I'm going to name some you don't know. Banian, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to punch you. How many ice pirates is it? Fuck you. That's how many ice pirates. Anyway, so the cast is Anthony Perkins plays one of the scientists on the Palomino. Ernest Borgnine's the reporter who's on the Palomino. Robert Forster, who you guys may or may not know, he's been in Quentin Tarantino movies, a bunch of other stuff.
Yep.
I followed his career because I just kind of like him. He plays he comes off a little emotionless, but he's more of a cool under fire captain of the ship. And then Maximilian Schell plays Dr. Reinhardt. Great. And then they have 2 floating robots that are sort of the kidified robots, so they're very cool, and they have lasers, so they're not super kidified. Vincent and Old Bob, they are voiced by Roddy McDowall and Slim Pickens, and it's great.
Oh, yeah.
So I love this movie. Like I said, the end sort of gets away from a little bit, as it's not very sciencey at all. In fact, honestly, it's not very sciencey at all through the whole thing. It's a lot of vague. It's closer to science fantasy masquerading as science fiction than anything else. But I do love the crap out of it. If you're wondering, it's going to get... I'll give it 1 Space Herpy. Because, again, that ending is a little weird. And also, the true ending of the movie, after the whole no spacesuit scene, is very 2001. Like... a lot of things fly by. You're not sure what you're seeing. Are they going to hell? What's going on? Because they're traveling through the black hole. That's their escape route, because that was a whole thing Dr. Reinhardt wanted to do, was to go through the black hole. So, it's a little weird, a little 2001-y, but I call it 1 Space Herpy. When it comes out on the new Disney thing, and I'm sure it will be, watch it for me. I hope you won't be disappointed. I love the fuck out of the movie. I've had it on videotape twice, DVD once, and I'm looking for a Blu-ray. Like I said, I own the collector's tin. The soundtrack is top-notch by John Barry. It has some very good themes. And it's one of the last movies shown in the theater with a overture at the beginning where it gives you sort of the overture theme music before the movie actually starts. So, there you go. 1 Space Herpy tentatively. I'd probably give it 0 if you let me, but I think even I can't give it 0.
All right, my next one is I finished season 2 of Outlander. Everybody knows Outlander is about a woman that goes back in time and starts, being part of...
Didn't know.
You didn't know? You don't know what Outlander is? Outlander is
Nope.
a show on Stars where a woman goes back in time, um, and pretty much Scottish Highlands, and actually deals with a lot of history. She
Okay.
interferes with a lot of battles in history, interferes with a lot of things, and this season, season 2, she jumps back into her normal timeline, and it's kind of like her retelling. And you find out about what's going on and does some history stuff, and goes through. She actually has flashbacks because she's in, I believe it's World War II. I can't remember. World War One, I think is what it is.
Didn't I saw the first episode a long time ago. A friend of mine, I
I
was
can't
visiting
remember.
her, and she had me watch it. But it was hadn't World War II just ended?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was about. It ended, but in this one she kind of has flashbacks because she sees her family and friends that she's been with all the time getting ready to do war. And so she has flashbacks of when she was in the war, and the parables that she's seen within each, timeline about how people are getting ready and such. So it was interesting. I, I can say I like it, but there was a very disconnect about what was going on. They did flashbacks back and forth. It stays more in the past. The last episode of the season, she goes back to her own timeline, and it's about her own timeline where she has a daughter. And she's a little bit older, and that you find out that, of course, the daughter was her husband back when she went back in time. And so she's got to explain to her daughter why her father's not here, blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting in that aspect. At the end, they have to go back in time again. I know there's season 3 is out there and season 4 is out there. I'm just not going to pay for it. I'll wait till it comes out on Netflix. If you like medieval stuff with a little bit of, science fiction in it, it's not bad. It's a decent. The characters are good. The characters are solid. There's a little bit of disbelief with her because she knows science stuff. Like she'll be sitting there and she's like, "Oh, I know this is called diabetes, but they didn't call it diabetes back then. What did they call it? Oh, sugar sickness." And it just kind of breaks it just doesn't fit right, if you know what I'm saying. Costumes and everything, great, wonderful. There's a lot of they go to France in this one, so there's a lot of like culture shocks between all the different people. But I mean, overall, it was pretty decent. I would give it at the most 2 space therapies, but I would go about a 1, in my personal belief, because I like it, but there was just something off about this season. The flashbacks and the going back and forth kind of ruined it a bit too much for me, but it wasn't bad. So I still recommend it. I'm going to watch season 3 and 4, see how it goes. I think we're having one more season and it's over. So I liked it. It's okay. I'd say that Lee Jenner says his girlfriend loves Highlander. It is. There is a lot of romance and a lot of stuff like that that does appeal. A lot more. Erica that listens, she really likes Highlander and thinks it's awesome too. It does appeal towards that audience a lot more. And you can tell that they're building it towards that, which is, there's nothing wrong with it. But there was just something off about this season compared to season 1. Because I really, really liked season 1. I only have one more. John, what do you have? Nothing?
I have a book.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You have your book. You're doing your reading streak.
Reading streak, yes, because I've not been reading enough. So I am 10 days in and still in. I'm on my second book, but the first book is actually an old BattleTech novel called Warrior and Guard, which is the first of the Warrior trilogy. Some of the early books written by Michael Stackpole. And I've not reread these in a very, very long time. The book is from 1988, and I don't think I've reread it, since maybe the early 90s. So it's been a while. And I mentioned I liked it, but I kind of felt it went a little quick and it was a little scattershot at points. It feels like a Stackpole book, but it definitely feels like an early Stackpole book. Definitely enjoyable. I love Michael Stackpole's work. Rarely does he write a book I don't enjoy. And it's one of the early BattleTechs and probably one of the early ones that sort of set the style they were going to do in the future, which is sort of that whole political intrigue with battling and all. It's sort of I guess it is the fifth book they made overall. They had the three Grey Death Legion books, which I've read in the past, but I don't remember them very much, so they could not have been amazing. And then one called The Sword and the Dagger, which I have not read, which I will look into, which sort of sets the stages. They sort of cover the outcome of that in Warrior on Guard. But it basically tells a story. It's a story of two brothers that are sort of separated already, and then one of them, well, they say he betrayed his country, but he did not. It's a lot more political intrigue than that. One of the guys on my Facebook page called it Game of Thrones Galaxy Edition, to which I replied, since it's 1988, don't you think it's more like that Game of Thrones is more like BattleTech Fantasy Edition? But if you like political intrigue and all, the first book is starting off that. It's a little less of that in this book. It's a little set in the stage. Again, like I said, it's a little scattershot at point. They have locations, so you can sort of keep up with who's going through. And what characters are going to be involved, because you can tell by the location they're in. And they have a date, so you can keep track of also, which is sort of starting the way off that Stackpole likes to do his books. But I very much enjoyed it. I started the second one yesterday, or actually the day before, but I only read like the prologue. I really started the second one yesterday, and I'm really enjoying that. I give the book, I'm going to give it maybe like 1.5 space herpes, because like I said, it is a little scattershot at points. There's obviously early writing by him, but so far the second one's really hitting his stride and really getting to be what I remember from him. But again, nostalgia, and I do love me a Michael Stackpole book. I own a ton, and he's a really good writer. He's wrote some of my favorite books, maybe many of my favorite books, since he wrote the X-Wing series too, or half of it.
Legionnaire also said that Outlander's on Amazon Prime. Yeah, it is. I checked Amazon Prime, and you can't watch season 3 and 4 unless you buy it or rent it. So that I checked, so I haven't been able to watch those extra seasons. So I'm kind of annoyed at that. My last one is because it came out on Netflix, and you got to relive awesome when you can find awesome, and that is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It is now on Netflix, and I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to watch it again. And kind of immersing into it and kind of look at it from a different viewpoint and whatever. It's very interesting to go and watch it again. It's still I'm still going to give it 0 space herpes, big surprise. But when I watched it this time, I was more aware of all the art to it. Mm-hmm. All the different ways they did things. Like when Miles was learning to swing, he was animated differently. And then when he was able to do it proficiently, they animated him differently. And frame-wise, he was done differently too.
It's really so groundbreaking, isn't it?
Well, what I think was really good about everything is the art style of stuff was so... I want to know whoever said, hey guys, we're going to make Into the Spider-Verse. I'm like, okay, cool, we're going to animate it. We can do all this really cool stuff. And then, we do all this, and then this guy goes, why don't we animate it like a comic book? And do the little dots, like it was a comic book, and do the shading like it was a comic book.
But they also, like you said, they changed the style a little bit based on sometimes the character, sometimes what they're doing. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's a game changer as far as animated theatrical releasing of superhero stuff. DC, who's formerly been the master of this, has got to step up and take notice.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that after this was done, the company that made it should be super fucking proud. And I'm sure they got a lot more work out of this too, because
they won an award, rightfully.
It artistically, music, characters, everything. I want another Into the Spider-Verse. I want another Miles Morales Spider-Man done in that style. I want a Miles.
They're planning on it actually. Yeah. Last I heard, they were planning on a sequel.
I want a Miles Morales Spider-Man. It doesn't have to be Into the Spider-Verse. It could be, Miles and Spider-Gwen. I'd be super happy about it. It could just be Miles, and I would be happy because Miles is one of my all-time favorite alternate Spider-Men. I love his character. I love the way he is. I love his costume. You name it. I can't wait for it.
I like all the characters. I mean, the Fat Peter Parker is really awesome.
Oh, I found someone I could finally cosplay. Peter B. Parker.
It's really cool.
Yeah. All the characters are really good. Artwork was really good. Stanley's scene choked me up again. It is such a good scene, and the way, and having him voice it and having him say that stuff, it just hit home again. I was like, "Fuck you, Marvel, fuck you." But I mean, it was poignant. It was great. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, the original that's on there with the blonde hair, dying is like, well, shit. It's you don't see superheroes die and stay dead per se. And in this one, they're like, no, he's fucking dead, dude.
And the other cool thing they do with this is Miles' story is still the classic Spider-Man story, but they do it so well you don't realize it's the same story.
Correct.
He's still got his parents, so you don't think of it the same way, but he still loses his uncle.
Yep.
In a very similar way, and you're like, oh shit! It's just really, really fucking well done. Like, it's great.
Yeah, it's up to what we should expect from a Spider-Man movie. Story-wise, character-wise, everything about it is 100% wonderful. Zero Space Harpies again. I own it on digital. I own it on Blu-ray. I 100% one of my top 5 movies of all time. Can't say anything negative about it. I know we're over a little bit, but this is a great movie. So
they have a sequel coming, and they have a spin-off coming, and they're looking at a TV series.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to the sequel because the first one was amazing. Guys, it is the end of the podcast. We want to thank everybody that showed up and came and watched. We appreciate everybody. If you watch us on YouTube, yes, I did get the bonus scene at the end, which was even cooler. There is a scene at the very, very end that you have to catch up and see. But guys, we really appreciate everybody that listens, whether you listen to us on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, whatever. We really appreciate it. Everything that happens here is, we do this for a lot of fun. We do this because we all like hanging out, and we hope that you do too. For that,
next week, I will not be here.
John will not be here. We will be looking for a co-host, and I think I have one.
Eating sushi.
We're replacing you.
We're replacing you for the weekend.
That's fine. I'm eating sushi.
Oh, just
with,
for the weekend?
The Creekins,
okay.
my old roommate. It's her annual birthday get-together, and we'll be going down to a very nice sushi place and taking it the fuck over. Because that's what we do. Because they won't take reservations, so we'll show up with like 30 people. We're like, come on, see this now, motherfucker.
So, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. We will talk to you later. Don't forget, Kathy will be streaming Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Except for Thursday, because it's the 4th of July. I was reminded by one of the people in my chat.
Yeah.
Monday through Wednesday on Facebook with Mahaba Streak.
Yep. So, for More Than Dice, I'm Gonzo.
I'm John.
I'm Kathy.
Good night.
You didn't think you'd sneak one in before me, did you, Kathy?
Happy birthday, America.
America. No, it's not. I only got to work 3 days and I have a day off, maybe multiples if I can get everything done in time. And then I have
I'm
the
going to
Monday
be
off.
eating hot dogs.